juxtaposed against the inauthentic faith actions of the Sadducees, the teachers of the Jewish law, the author of the Gospel of Mark shares a glimpse of Jesus teaching his disciples what authentic faith looks like. Here's what Mark has to say. Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins, worth only a few cents. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put into the treasury more than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on." I've got a story for you. One Sunday morning at worship, a very wealthy man rose to tell the congregation about his faith. "I'm a millionaire," he said, "and I attribute it all to the rich blessings of God in my life. I remember the turning point in my spiritual journey. I just earned my first dollar, and I went to church meeting that night. The speaker was a missionary who told all about her work. It was an exciting tale of God making a difference in people's lives. Somehow, I wanted to be able to support her work. Of course, the offering basket was passed, and it was going to be used to support God's work through the ministry effort. The dilemma for me," says this millionaire, "was that I knew I only had $1 and had to either give it all to God's work or give nothing at all. So at that moment, I decided to give my whole dollar to God. I believe that God blessed that decision, and that is why I am a rich man today." He finished, and there was an awe-filled silence at his testimony as he moved toward his seat. When he sat down, a little old lady sitting in the same pew leaned over to him and said, "I dare you to do it again." I dare you to do it again. I feel that this congregation is a lot like that millionaire, and God is leaning over to us and saying, "I dare you to do it again." For 157 years, since 1858, this congregation has been responding to God's challenge to be in ministry with and for not only the Mason City community, not only Cerro Gordo County, not only Iowa, not only the United States, but also the entire world. In the midst of that journey of faithfulness, there have been numerous times when you and your predecessors in faith have been asked both as a group and individually to respond to a ministry need, and touched by the Holy Spirit, you have responded to the need. You have been and are making a difference. Sometimes it's been to feed people, sometimes to clothe people, sometimes to set those who are oppressed free, sometimes to preach good news, sometimes to just be a presence of compassion. Always always. It has been in the knowledge that God's realm, God's kingdom is here, is now. Along the way, as lives have been transformed, this congregation has also understood the need to provide a place of respite for the saints, you and those who came before you. Have understood the need for and craved a sanctuary that would provide a space where the convinced faithful and those seeking a relationship with God could come together and be fed spiritually, emotionally, physically. Part of your response to God has been to raise these walls, to use this building as a tool to accomplish amazing ministry. Over the years, you've been asked to give your all to God, to throw that first dollar of security into the offering plate and risk not getting it back. Like the woman at the temple, the offering may have been viewed by others as meager, small in amount compared to what others have done, but it was given from your hearts. In God's view, that is huge. You have done what God has asked of you. Quite simply, you have given the gift of yourself and the gift of your resources with a willingness of heart. This ministry has been blessed and been a blessing to others because of the riches that each of you brings. We are growing together daily in faith, in participation, and in financial stability because of the ways that each of you has risked. Do you hear it? God is leaning over and saying, I dare you to do it again. I would imagine that some of you have come here today risking just a little bit by stepping inside this building. You've responded to God's dare to place your trust in God with a reassurance that there's something more to this thing called life. You've answered the dare to become part of a community of faith, even though you might not be completely sure what that means. Even though you've been hurt when you've taken that kind of risk before. Even though it might seem easier to have instead said, no thanks, God. If this is your first time here, thank you. Thank you for risking. If you've been coming for a while, thank you for risking. The risk is worth it. But we're not done. Do you hear it? God is leaning over like an old woman and whispering, I dare you to do it again. I dare you to risk it all. Over the next 4 weeks, we are going to be using our imagination to respond to God's dare. We're going to be imagining what God has yet to do through the life of this church, this congregation, this community of faith. Sometime last week, if you're on our mailing list, you should have received a letter asking you to consider your financial support of this ministry for the next year. You are simply asked to prayerfully consider how you might participate financially. Then on November 22nd, at our worship celebration, you will be invited to place a pledge of your response to God's challenge on the altar. After worshiping on that same Sunday, we will celebrate the outcome of what God is already accomplishing by sharing in a roasted turkey potluck and giving thanks. We are being dared to risk it all as we find new ways to reach out in God's love to a world that is feeling pretty unlovable. We're being dared to risk it all as we invite new persons into this ministry. God is saying, I dare you. I dare you. Imagine what God has yet to do in the life of this congregation. Imagine what amazing ministry there is yet to be accomplished. But of course, that's really the easy part. To imagine. The hard part, the risky part, the part that I think God is daring us to do is to move out of our comfort zone, to give out of our poverty, to trust that God is truly a part of our lives and is calling each of us to discover our ministry potential, and then to act on that discovery. One of the most poverty-stricken parts of our souls is the part that hesitates to trust what God can do in our lives and through our lives to touch others. Now, Mark doesn't tell us the rest of the story. We don't know what happened to that poor widow who gave all to the ministry. We don't know if she even had another meal after giving all she had to live on. And I'm not going to concoct a happy ending just because, well, I don't have the knowledge of her relationship with God, other than the visible, concrete act of giving to what she believed in. I can't tell you the rest of her story, but I can tell you mine. I am taking God's dare. As the song goes, I know not why God's wondrous grace to me hath been made known, nor why, unworthy, Christ in love redeemed me for his own. But I know whom I have believed, and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I have committed unto him that day. In the midst of the uncertainty, in the fear of risking, in the possibility of falling flat on my face, I am saying, all right, God, I'll do it again. I'll reach out in faith again. I'll risk sharing the love that I've known through you again. I'll risk sharing it with others. And I'll do it again and again. Because I know that God, through the love of Christ and the power of the Holy Spirit, will strengthen me and give me the tools to be a spiritual millionaire many times over. How about you? I dare you to do it again. I dare you to do it again. I dare you to imagine what God has yet to do through you and this community of faith. Just a thought.